There's something about a warm bowl of cozy soup that can seriously just feed your soul, especially when it's high protein and can keep you full for a long time. Today I'm going to show you 3 super cozy, high protein soup recipes which are going to keep you going throughout the winter season. We are starting off with a creamy chicken noodle soup. I love this version because it is extra creamy and even a little bit cheesy, so it's really filling and hearty. To get started for this soup, you mince up some onion and saute that in a large pot over medium heat, and while that's cooking, you can go ahead and cut up some carrots in small pieces and add those to the pot as well. Then, of course, I chop up 2 stalks of celery because what is a chicken noodle soup without some celery? Next, for the garlic, I like adding 3 cloves here, but if you're a garlic lover, you could add even more if you want. At this point, it's good to add a hefty pinch of salt while you are sauteing those vegetables together. This combination of onion, carrot, and celery is called a mirepoix, and it's used as the base of so many dishes and serves as a perfect base for this soup. Now for all of the dried herbs. I usually add some dried thyme, oregano, along with some ground sage. Just be sure to stir right after adding the herbs so they don't stick to the bottom of the pan. Now, for the first key to creaminess in this soup, some canned, unsweetened coconut milk. If your coconut milk is hard at the top, that is completely normal. Just add it to the pot and it will melt all together. The coconut milk will not make the soup taste at all like coconut, it just makes it creamy. Next, we add in some vegetable broth. I do this by adding some water and broth cubes just to keep it easy. Now for my favorite part of the soup, some vegan Parmesan. I recommend always having some of this on hand as it adds such a nice flavor to so many dishes. This is super simple to make. It is just a mix of ground cashews and nutritional yeast blended up with some salt. It stays good for a long time, so you can always add it to pastas or just any other kind of dish that you would like to add a layer of flavor to. This gives the soup a rich, slightly cheesy flavor and also adds a lot of protein, which is always a big plus. Then I drain and rinse 1 can of chickpeas and add that to the pot as well. I like adding chickpeas to this as it just pairs really well with the flavoring of the soup. And what would chicken noodle soup be without some noodles? Here I added in some elbow noodles, but any kind of smallish noodles work perfectly in this soup. As the noodles cook, they're going to absorb a lot of the liquid and they're also going to slightly thicken the broth. While the noodles are cooking, I chop up some plant-based chicken. I like adding plant-based chicken just because it helps it to stay in the same flavor profile as a typical chicken noodle soup. But if you prefer not to use it, then you could just add another kind of bean, like white beans would be really good. Since it doesn't need to be cooked a long time, I add in the plant-based chicken close to the end of the cooking time of the soup. And as you can see, it is creamy and even a little bit silky and seriously tastes so good. Next, we are moving on to a hearty, rich vegan beef stew. This one has the most delicious broth and really just sticks to your ribs. I use a combination of beans and plant-based beef for the protein in this dish. I like using Beyond Meat's ground beef for this recipe. It is a 100% plant-based beef substitute, and I like it because it really tastes like beef. I start off by browning it in a large pot for a few minutes until it is browned and cooked through, and then I remove it from the pan. This recipe has a lot of vegetables in it, and we're gonna start off by mincing up some onions, carrots, along with some celery. In the same pan that I cooked the beef in, I just heat up some olive oil and add the onion and let that cook for a few minutes, making sure to scrape up all of the bits of ground beef that were left on the bottom of the pan. This is called fond and it adds a lot of flavor to the soup, so make sure you scrape that up. Then we add in the carrot and celery. While that's cooking, I start chopping up the mushrooms, which are also high in protein. I like quartering them so they are kind of bigger and chunky. Then I add this to the pot with a generous pinch of salt. This allows the mushrooms to release their liquid and become more flavorful. Now for one of my favorite vegetables, parsnips. They are starchy, kind of like potatoes, but have a slightly sweet flavor. I love them, and I honestly find them to be so underrated. So I just peel these and cut them into cubes and do the same with my potatoes. vegetables. And then once my vegetables have been cooking together for about 10 minutes, I add in some garlic, and at this point my house is already smelling so good, but it's about to get even better. Then I add in some flour, and I stir that around so it coats the vegetables, and this is going to help our broth to thicken up later. At this point, I add in some red wine. This really gives the broth a delicious, rich flavor. Here, I just measure out 1 cup and add it to the pot with the vegetables, and they will soon start to soak up that red wine flavor. Then I add vegetable broth along with the parsnips and potatoes. At this point, you add back the beef that we cooked earlier along with 1 can of beans, which has been drained and rinsed, and you just give it all a stir. Then you put the lid back on and cook until the parsnips and potatoes are nice and soft. This stew looks beautiful and honestly tastes even better. If this one can't warm you up on a cold day, then I don't know what can. And last, but definitely not least, a hearty cabbage and white bean stew. This stew is so flavorful and nourishing. I always feel so healthy after eating it, and it really does keep me full for a long time. The star of this dish is cabbage. It gives the soup such a nice texture and is packed full of nutrients. As always, we start by mincing and sauteing an onion and then thinly slicing the cabbage. I find it best if the cabbage isn't cut too thick. It just makes the stew easier to eat and gives it a really nice texture. Then we add the cabbage along to the pot with the onion, along with a good pinch of salt, and we let this cook down for at least 10 minutes. The key here is getting it nice and brown and wilted. While that cooks, we cut the carrot into smallish pieces, and once the cabbage is ready, then you add the carrots to the pot and give it a stir. Then just add some broth. Again, I do this just with water and broth cubes. And now we add in some potatoes that have been peeled and cut into bite-sized pieces. For the protein in this dish, we're going to add 2 different kinds of beans, garbanzos and white beans, which have been drained and rinsed. You could also use 2 cans of white beans if you prefer, but I like the mix of garbanzos and white beans. Then we add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. This doesn't make the soup taste tomatoey, it just provides acidity, which gives it a nice flavor. Then for herbs, here I just add some dried thyme. And I also add a very small pinch of crushed red pepper, which balances out the slight sweetness of the cabbage. Then we just cover it and let it cook until the potatoes are done. And then just be sure to give it a taste and make sure it doesn't need more salt or herbs. Here I just decided to add some black pepper. Finally, just to add some green, you can add kale or spinach. I decided to add some spinach here. I really hope you guys liked these recipes. If you did, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. We will see you next time.